All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Collab Collective. My name is Josh, your host, and this is where we are redefining the way creators connect. So if you did join us on our last live stream, we had a live coaching session with Tom Chan. And so what I got out of that was I love experimenting. So with that, this is going to be a similar fashion. So we're just going to show up. I have two amazing guests. It's not scripted. We are not really prepared, but I think you guys are in for a treat because these two are they were amazing. Even just getting together and proposing the idea to get them onto this live stream. It was just supposed to be like a quick 5-minute chat. Ended up being an hour and a half. So we were just able to pick up amazing conversations. So with that, I will quickly introduce them and then they can share a little bit about themselves. But we have on the digital stage joining us soon is Jarell Alvarez. He is the founder of Vancouver design Checkin. I'll leave it at that. And then we have the wonderful Whitmire, and she hails all the way from originally, I guess, based in Houston, but she's like a crazy jet setter. So she was in New York one time and then San Francisco, and now I'm not even too sure. So she's awesome. She's a product designer, also transitioned from an engineering career. So with that, I am going to bring them on. So please welcome them. All right. Welcome, guys.
Hi.
Hey. Ooh, I got to fix my screen here. There you go. Okay, so Jarell, if you can share a little bit about what you do, tell the audience about your background.
Yeah, for sure. So I am a product designer. I work for a company called Copperleaf. It's basically we're basically giving tools for utility companies to help them make better decisions for a better world. That's kind of like that catchphrase. But yeah, I've been designing for 4 years in Vancouver and really enjoying that side. And then as well on the side, like you said, I'm also an ADPList mentor. And I do that fairly regularly, and I've been one since December. And then I'm also, like you said, the founder of Vancouver Design Checkin, where we kind of have some biweekly calls just to kind of hang out, have like an AMA style town hall discussion. We also do like matchups, so you can be matched up with another person in the community, kind of like coffee buddies, because they're kind of, donut. And then I also do Connect 4, so same idea, but just with 4 other people.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. All right. I love how we're all sporting pretty fancy headphones, so this is going to be good.
I had to put these on. Or else I
And
would have just used like the normal AirPods.
and Whitmire, could you share a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So yes, I'm jet setting. My location is currently in San Francisco.
Okay. Okay.
But
Great.
I'm originally from Houston, born and raised. I am by the books. I got a degree in mechanical engineering, and within the last year, I've transitioned into UX design, as well as product design, as you just mentioned. And so right now, I currently freelance, and I don't think I have anything else to say
Yeah, no,
besides
that's
like
perfect.
now COVID is like, kind of dying down. I have my vaccine, so I'm off. My home is an airport.
Yes, yes. Oh, it must be good to travel again.
Yeah, it feels a bit surreal.
Yeah, like a big dream is over or something.
You mean the big dream is starting?
Or yeah, or the nightmare's over, I guess. Yeah. Okay, okay. So before we continue, I totally forgot the topic of today. What we're going to be talking about is putting yourself out there. So we're going to address imposter syndrome, and also just like putting yourself out there as a designer, as a creative, and also putting your work to be critiqued. And we're just going to start it off from there. So I think there's going to be a lot of interesting conversations that'll pop up. So yeah, let's start with this. Have you guys ever experienced imposter syndrome?
Sure,
And
Definitely.
of
and
course.
and when was like the most recent time? Like
Um,
right now?
with Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it definitely ebbs and flows. It's funny because I don't feel that way whenever I'm actually designing stuff and making like like I'm actually producing something.
Okay.
But I think it's at its height whenever people ask what I do for a living.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, you know, by trade, I don't have a formal education in design. And I actually think a lot of designers don't. But
Right.
I think there is a um, maybe like a I don't have the right word for it, but there's definitely like misconception. There's a misconception that you have to have like training,
Mm-hmm.
like formal training in order to be something of a profession.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, to shorten that answer, it ebbs and flows.
That's interesting because you actually you haven't gone to like a boot camp or anything, right?
Yeah, I decided against it.
Okay.
It's not that I think that they're bad. So I definitely want to clarify that those who decide to do it, everyone is on a different journey, and I think that's the best and worst part of design is that you can come from different backgrounds and still provide something of value in the
Mm.
industry. Um, but in my personal experience, I decided to not do one.
Yeah, no, I think that's really cool because I came from, I did go to a boot camp, and then we have Jarell who
Right.
actually did a full degree in design. So we have like, we've covered the spectrum. So it'll be, yeah,
Kind of.
kind of. Okay.
So this
I
is
don't even
where
know
my
your
imposter.
background.
Oh, okay, perfect. So this is where my imposter syndrome kind of comes from. Is that so? I wanted to become a web designer. Like
Okay.
I thought I can code and stuff like that. And I thought that was cool because then I could create things. But I didn't even know that until like last minute when I was applying for college. And then my parents were like, "Oh, you need to get a job, or like you need to choose something for your future." I'm like, I don't know. Um, I had no clue what I want. And then my aunt came along from Winnipeg, and she hasn't visited us in like 10 years, and was like, "Hey, my nephew is a web designer and makes this amount of money." I'm like, "That's livable, and you can create
I think
stuff."
I think that's so unfair to have an 18-year-old decide like what
I
they want to do
know.
for the rest of their life. I
Mm,
think we should really reconstruct how we encourage um,
Hmm.
not only the youth, but just like anyone, how to pursue their like I won't say dreams or just like their passion, because I also think those words are quite unfair, but
Mhm.
just in general, like how do you pursue the next steps in your life? Like how do you pursue transition? Um,
Yeah.
because
I
as an 18-year-old, that's
Mhm.
not like, it's not fair.
Yeah, the alternative paths and being exposed element was definitely not in my wheelhouse. Like I liked photography, I liked cooking. So I actually considered doing those. I also went to like a graphic design demo day and I asked like one of the person while I was being like toured. It's like, would you do this again? And they paused. And
Mhm.
then they said, yeah. I was like, your lukewarm answer has definitely made me not want to go here. And then they didn't qualify me. And then they're like, okay, here, you're gonna pay for like $40,000. I'm like, Dad. And he's like, I'm like, nah, we're good. I'm out.
Mm.
Yeah, that's so
So
interesting because I didn't
mhm.
have I think my transition into deciding that I wanted to pursue engineering as a degree was very pragmatic. Like
Huh.
every job and profession that I wanted just became more and more pragmatic, and then it just ended up an engineer. I don't know how wide. I don't think I really casted my net very widely in order to decide, like, yes, this is what I wanted to do with my life.
I think there was it's like the safe Asian career path that most people would kind of
Honestly,
fall
though,
into,
no, and it's true though because
which I'm
you're right.
guilty.
Yeah, it's the kind of that archetype that we kind of get beholden to subconsciously,
Mm.
um, and this can lead to another topic, which is like seeing people of color, seeing people your skin type,
Right,
seeing
right.
people your nationality in, the role that may seem unattainable or different. That is a very immediate um, outlook. It's like everyone Filipino goes into like nursing or
Mm.
other kind of typical things. I think my mom mentioned, "Oh, I want you to be a lawyer." I'm like, "No, I'm good. I don't like studying." And then that was kind of all the pressure that she put on me. But I feel like I put way more pressure, especially young, than I needed to, just because I didn't know how to cope
Mhm.
with anything. So then, yeah, I got into my program. I found like, oh, there's this program at BCIT, which is a technical institute, and I was like, oh man, this is kind of this is fun. This has a lot of cool courses, and so it had like design, it had development, and it had marketing. So it looked like you can cover everything. And I like to experiment. I love trying things. I have a voracious curiosity, especially with food. Um, so I got in, and then again, like I had the mindset. Well, sorry, it was full by the time I got in because I was late, right? And then um, so I took like a gap year in another university, just studying whatever. And then in BCIT, it was like 8 hours a day, 8 courses, a semester. It was super hands on and super technical, and it was 2 years.
Mm.
Um, and then I read, and I thought I was going to be a developer. Didn't really like developing as much. Just got angry most of the time. Um, uh,
Code makes you angry.
Code
Why
makes
does it
you
not work?
Why does it not work? Why does it not work? Why does it not work? You debug. Why does it not work? Then you check the debug. Then you don't understand what's going on. Then you Google. Then it's like this crazy, horrible loop until you finally realize you added the wrong semicolon in the wrong spot out of like
Yeah, you're
50,
just like,
80
oh, you
runs.
added a period here. And you're like, oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah. So that wasn't in the cards. And then I read Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug.
Mm.
Mhm.
I was like, oh man, UX is just that simple. And you could just like say things aren't working to big companies and you can chill at a beach and that's how you can be a person. I'm like, oh,
Are you
I
chilling at
want
a
to try,
beach right now?
So are
no,
you fulfilling that life?
not yet. I think I want that part of life one day, maybe. I'm not too big on freelancing for now. I think maybe in the future I might dip my toes, and I'm even considering coaching or doing some other interesting things outside of it. Like literally today I was thinking, why do you have to talk to companies when you could just talk to people instead? and have your clients be kind of a mixed bag rather than just companies. Because companies, they're a whole other thing. But people, they're a bit more reasonable, and you can talk to them and you can kind of care about them more than a public figure.
Very true. By the way, if you guys are watching on YouTube, please drop a comment, and I'd love to answer some of your questions along the way. So you're joining, you're in this with us.
So I want to go back to.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. I want to go back to like the Asian archetypes because we're all Asian here.
Oh, we're getting deep already. Okay.
It's funny because so my parents wanted me to be a doctor, specifically a pharmacist, because I have 2 older siblings and none of us decided to be a doctor or be in the medical field. Engineering was not one that my family wanted me to be.
Okay.
And then it's also funny because I actually had a very lack understanding, or like, I don't know, possibly awareness that it was also not going to be a lot of women in the industry. And like how hard it was going to be. So it's interesting that, you mentioned engineering to be one of the archetypes of like an Asian parent wanting for their kids. That was not something my family wanted. They're like, you should just move over to something else. And I remember this like my 3rd year of college where they're like, why don't you move to business?
Right.
So yeah, maybe that's an anomaly, but it definitely wasn't something that was encouraged. And then, like I remember having this conversation with my parents and saying like, hey, I'm not going to go back to being an engineer. And they looked at me and say, did you pick the wrong major? Did we waste our money?
Oh my God.
That's a big deal.
Wow. Let's unpack that. So
okay.
That was your parents. That was your parents' first response.
That was my parents. What are you asking?
Yeah.
What was my parents' first response? I think they were just, I think in general they were quite supportive, but in a very like Asian way. And what I mean by that is, okay, great, you've decided that you want to do something else, but can you tell me what your plan is? And I think that's fair for anyone where there's a lot of like ambiguity, where you don't exactly know what's going to happen. And you also can't foresee the future too, And I think right now designers are quite saturated because as we've moved, I think the pandemic has a lot to do with it. As things move away from the gig economy and into like the digital space, people are trying to get jobs in the digital space to kind of secure themselves, essentially.
Right. Okay. So, how do you say it? Josie? My Asian parents wouldn't even consider engineering and comp sci real engineering. So that's
actually I don't think my parents would either. Anytime like I've told my parents about like developers and they're like, so they work in IT. And I'm like, no, not quite. Like, if I try to explain to them a software developer, they're like, so they make computers. And I'm like, no, not quite. So they work in IT. And I'm like, I don't know how to explain this.
So I had a family member describe what I do as IT. And I think, so this is the interesting thing, I think, where, looping back to like imposter syndrome and like defining who we are and our roles, because even in like UX and UI and product designer, like it's all, the terms kind of blend. And so it's like, I almost feel like if the roles that you have is not so well recognized and has that strong reputation, Like
Mhm.
it's almost like you can't really own it, or I think there's that public recognition that's kind of lacking. And so maybe it's like, oh, well, what am I? Like if I call myself like a product designer or UX designer or full stack designer, like, but is that like legit? You know, I don't know if that is that something like you guys have gone through or thought.
Yeah. So this is a perfect segue to I'll skip ahead with my origin, but basically in my practicum, 2 years in, for 2.5 years, I was on a team in an agency for like specialized in automotive dealerships, and I was basically doing visual design. Um, but like I told you earlier, I wanted to become a UX designer. I loved the idea of being a UX designer. You know, I was super sold on the book, and so I just kept calling myself a UX designer, even though I was doing mock-ups in like 2 days for homepages, even though I was like doing Google ads and Facebook ads and stuff in like 4 hours. Like I always had that kind of mentality that I will get out of here. I will take this amount of learnings. I will put this into the UX bucket. I will put this into the soft skill bucket. And then there's like all this theory that I studied for a straight year, learned like one thing every single day with like newsletters and stuff like that in order to have like a vocabulary that works towards UX, but never having the actual experience except some through like 2 freelance jobs. But that's it.
Right.
And now I'm a product designer doing everything, and I'm actually doing UX for the first time.
Oh wow. Okay, so now do you feel like pretty like do you have that confidence that goes behind the name? I still want to touch on this imposter syndrome, right? Like
Oh no, of course. And so this is the golden question, and that's why when you ask like, when have you been experiencing imposter syndrome, I could tell you like for 3 months already. It's been almost every day, but I think you get into a rhythm. And when you're like what Meyer said, like I don't feel like an imposter when I'm designing. I don't feel like it when I'm in the pixels. I don't even feel it when I'm in the meeting or justifying my designs. It's almost when something kind of comes at me, and maybe it's something that's not within my vocabulary or something that I just haven't experienced, and I have to take a step back. And just to kind of sit with it, that's when it kind of creeps in. And it's like, oh yeah, you don't know this process, or you don't know this thing, or you don't know that thing, and you don't know that thing. And I have to like hear that voice. And I'm gonna go quote a really good podcast I listened to recently, which is Chris Bosch in Tim Ferriss show. And he said from his coach, Eric Spolstra, what he was telling him about imposter syndrome. And he said, it's a part of the process. You will go for it, and that's okay. You will hear that voice in your head, and you just have to put it away and just put in the work and let the work do the talking.
What do you think, Whitmire?
Yeah, I agree with Jarell where it's going to pop up because you can't control what thoughts that you think, right? And I think for anyone who is a regular meditator really understands that concept where, yeah, like you can't, you don't have free will on the thoughts that pop up. And
you are not your thoughts.
Exactly. So you're also not your thoughts. I also am quite ambiguous whenever people ask me what I do. So if I'm feeling snarky, I'll tell them that I'm a professional pixel pusher, because that's really what I do. If I,
what about
but in general, I just
solver?
No, I'm just really big on alliterations.
Okay.
So I think professional pixel pusher. I think that has a nice
a good one.
Ring to it. I'm gonna change after this. I'm gonna change my LinkedIn to professional pixel pusher.
And then just change it every single week. Just have a reminder. Just keep people on the loop.
Right. So anyways, but when in general, and I've actually noticed a lot of people who, specifically entrepreneurs that are really passionate about what they do, they never say like, they never hold their identity to like a profession that ends with an ER. So for instance, my brother is a wedding photographer, and he's built like a very sustainable business in the last like 10 years. But if someone were to come up to him and ask him what he did for a living, he most likely would tell you like, oh, I shoot pictures. So instead of defining himself as a like as a certain profession, he'll say what he actually does. And I like that, because then you don't hold what you do as part of your identity. And so I typically will tell people like, oh, I'll say like I do UX design, or I just create digital products. So at least it's digestible for people to understand like generally what I do at the very surface level. And especially like Josh, what you said, people who are specifically not from the tech space have very little knowledge on the word UI, UX, product designer. But that doesn't mean that they don't understand the concept of it. So generally, when I talk to people, I'll just say what I do rather than like who I am in terms of like a profession. So just to tag on further than that, I do have a hard time detaching myself as an engineer, because I have that, I do have that degree, quote unquote, for right? Sure. So I do have a certificate that says that I've accomplished that. And so I have no problem telling people like, yeah, I'm an engineer, but I don't do that anymore, rather than telling people, oh, I'm a UX designer, rising.
Okay. So, there's so many things I want to touch on, because that's like, you have a certificate that's obviously you've been tested, you've passed, you're recognized. So there's that credential, right? Yeah. And so that's like, so I'm thinking like, just going back to like confidence in who you are and what you do. So you're saying you don't normally tell people like who you are as like a certain role, but more of like what you do. So is what you do define who you are? And does that feed into the confidence, right? Because I want to come rope it back into like confidence. I think at the end of the day, it's like how are you confident as a designer, and at what point do you kind of consider yourself, okay, now I've arrived, I'm a designer and I can like own it?
If I were to just say like the very surface level in which I started to call myself a designer is when I started to get paid to do it.
Oh, okay.
So like once I got paid to do it, I was like, okay, well, I should stop saying that like I'm dabbling in this. Like someone has trusted me, or I've like made a product that has launched. So like for instance, I work with UCSF, and but it's a volunteering position, so I do pro bono work for them. But I've helped them, like the product that I'm working on with them will launch. So and we do all of the processes for it. But anyway, like to go back to your question, so surface level, that's when I would call myself a designer. It's like, I'm being paid to do this now. Okay. I've put myself out there that I have, either convinced someone, or I don't know, just like falsely made someone trust me to put their work in my hands. But like you're producing stuff and then you're getting paid for it. So it's like a transaction at that point. But for the whole identity thing, I actually have a pretty hard time with identity. And like not because I don't think I know who I am. It's more of like, I don't want to continuously put titles to what I do in terms of my profession as like who I am as a person. Because I just exist, right? Like I am like, I'm an organism and I'm here talking to you guys.
It's going deep. I love it.
But the thing is like, you know, that ER at the end, like
Yeah.
engineer,
Mm-hmm.
designer, it's always going to change. And I would want my life to be that way too.
Mm-hmm.
So even though at that moment in time, I might be doing that as my profession, it's not going to be something that I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Because eventually, you know, if I was thinking of all the things that I'm interested in doing, it's going to change at least every like couple of years, and then if not like every 5-10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would encourage people to think about rather than like becoming something, and I actually do this in my interviews too when I interview with companies. I tell them like how I would like my life to be rather than like what titles am I trying to achieve, because titles don't mean anything. I take that back. Titles do have certain values. So it's not like you should just like not go for titles, but in terms of your career growth, whatever that looks like, it's always going to change. So what do you want in the long run, in terms of like what your career looks like, what you're going to be learning, rather than like, I want to be a senior lead UX designer in 3 years. It's just like there's a lot of attachment to that, and it's not that I won't achieve it. It's more of like, that's not, if you're going to apply design thinking to it, it's not the sole goal that you're trying to get to. It's not the actual problem that you're trying to solve.
Mm-hmm.
So
good.
I have a really good way to wrap up kind of what you said. Have you seen the movie Soul?
Yes. So
yes,
good.
I have.
Okay, great. So for those who haven't watched it, and I'm not going to spoil anything, although this is kind of spoiling it. Basically, when you really want something and you kind of dream of that title, and you dream of the experiences, and you dream that it's such this like aha moment, and you know, being a professional designer is everything I'm going to be, and you know, all of this kind of build up, you forget the experiences of who you are. You forget to enjoy all the smaller moments that build up who you actually are. So, you know, if you identify just as a designer, then you kind of, you know, lose the humanity to yourself as well. So I think that was one string that I wanted to pull. I think another string was, I agree, like, you know, we're constantly changing as humans, and we're constantly growing. And for example, like to boost my confidence up and just to really shoot for the stars, I'm like, oh, I want to be a design director, you know, and then I want to be a manager and do all this kind of stuff. And then now I'm kind of reevaluating that again. And I think that's a healthy way to just look back at my career track. Like, is that what I want? Can I do that? Can I see an archetype that's in my company and like actually talk to him about it and see what his experiences are like, and know that if that's the case for me. If not, then I need to pivot. I need to stay like a chameleon, like an agile methodology. I need to be able to just say, I'm gonna do something else. Or you know what? For example, like I said earlier, maybe I want to do coaching, career coaching, later on in my life. Maybe I want to take on some freelance jobs and then career coaching, so I can have a two-way streak and somehow marry the two together, right? Maybe for now, like I'm already thinking right now, if anyone has any ideas, please DM me, please like message me, because I want like something on the side that I can do and sell, just handmade, because I want to get away from my computer. I just want to do like some bespoke.
I've already given you ideas and you haven't implemented any of them.
Wait, Jarell.
I forgot. That was very late at the night when we were talking about it, and that one is a lot of work. I can't remember.
What was the idea again, Whitmire? No, it's okay. We don't have to bring it up.
I don't remember, but it was after like it
Yeah,
was one of
it
our
was
late
like
night
free business
conversation.
advice. It was really great.
I
It
can't
was like
remember.
back to back to back. And
Damn it.
I even made it sustainable too. I made it where you can feed like his services into, yeah, I made an entire
Yeah,
loop.
it was
And I
pretty spot on. It was good.
Crap. I was blown away by other stuff that we talked about, and so it may have slid my mind because I was fixated on something that you said, and you
it
knew that
was,
moment when I brought it up.
you can keep digging a hole for yourself, but you just missed an opportunity for a great business for
Okay.
yourself.
Okay,
Oh
all right.
no.
Let's stay on track here. So, um, okay, let's talk about like as a designer or even as a creative, right? Putting your work out. Like for you guys, was there a time when you felt confident to say, okay, I'm happy to put my work out like in public, whether it's like say your own Instagram page or LinkedIn or portfolio? Like at what point did you feel okay to just like put your portfolio work out?
Oh, I'm terrible at it. I am not a role model at that at all
Okay, so
whatsoever.
let's talk about that. So
Um, I so the first time that I felt confident putting my work out there was when it was already complete, which is
okay.
actually not something I would recommend for beginner designers.
Mm,
And it's
Agreed.
actually like a hurdle that I'm still going through. Um, so when I had made my portfolio, I had the first time, because I'm going through a second iteration right now. I was like, all right, it's done. I'm putting it out there. And now it's been like a handful of months. All of my work is obsolete already because I have new, better work.
mm,
And I haven't really taken the first step to like transition into the update. And
mm-hmm.
so, yeah, I that's definitely a mental block for me.
Mm.
I have a very hard time showing incomplete work.
Ah,
But I think it's incomplete rather than thinking of it as like, hey, this is where I am.
I see.
Mm.
Right.
I yeah, I'm
Thanks
not
for sharing,
a
Whitmire.
role model. Yeah, agree. I'm not a role model either. I like don't have. I saw Behance and I was like, you have to put all that together. Hell no. And I saw Gerbil and I'm like, I think when I was a junior, in my first company, I uploaded like maybe 3 things on Dribble and then I gave up. And then
Mm,
I was like, this isn't
Yeah, that takes a lot out of you too.
mm-hmm.
does.
Um, the unfortunate part is, I think the more visually appealing. Okay, this is advice I'd wish I received when I just did my when I just transitioned. Just make your shit look pretty. Make your because that is, especially as a junior designer,
Mm,
or just someone that's transitioning. I think right now, I'm probably at the cusp. And just because I do have previous work beforehand, especially as an engineer, I do have a career before that are definitely translatable. But
right.
as a junior designer and you're just coming out, just make your shit look pretty. Because
Okay, so what do you mean? Like, what would that look like? It's a
yeah, so make
very
it look
subjective term.
yeah, make it look visually appealing, keep it up with the trends, or make it somewhat unique. And the reason why I would suggest that to people is because um, that's going to be the one way, your kind of your ticket to really stand out. Um, because your work, the method that you are going to use, the double diamond or the triple diamond, I've also agile, scrum, things like that. Um, you're going to do that and you're going to show that through your work as well. But I think those hone in methods are the methods that are more going to be sought out for the designers that are the intermediate designers, that are the senior level designers, because it's like now you really understand, and that is like your expertise, that you understand and you know how to make decisions on this entire process. But if you're trying to get in like in the very beginning, just make it look pretty.
I have another side to that story. I
Go
totally
for
don't
it.
agree. Just because I've seen a lot of portfolios and I've reviewed a lot of portfolios, and I see a very
Mhm.
similar thing is the fact that they just make it pretty. So here's the other side to this story, which I want to kind of explore.
Okay.
I don't think that you should miss the process at all whatsoever. But in terms of like developing the portfolio, I think making it look pretty will make you stand out.
Okay. Well, this
But
depends.
but you can counter.
This depends if your portfolio is for UX versus say just strictly UR graphic
That's true.
design, right?
That's true.
Because graphic
Yeah, that's
design,
true.
you focus
You need to make
definitely
it look pretty.
on really pretty. That's like the main thing. So
Mhm.
so are we referring to like say a full stack for now?
No,
Okay.
UX
Okay.
designer.
Okay.
Let's just say
Okay.
UX designer
All right. Okay.
Sure.
or
So with
product
UX
designer.
designer, yeah. So what UX designer, what usually stands out to me is the one that isn't pretty and the one that really took the time to explore a problem that is not very known, or like consumer
Okay.
version of things. Because I see the same kind of things, like here's a fridge, here's a product, here's a consumer product, here's an app that's consumer based. I want to see something that's not typically done by anyone, or is one of those weird niche things that requires a user that has this amount of experience. For example, enterprise design. I'm very fascinated with the problem solving that you have to curb, just because
Boring
it's like
stuff.
it appears like it's boring, but then when you actually have to articulate it, it is another language. And it's so
Right.
fascinating that you can't like, there's so many things you can't do.
Right. But how many junior designers are you going to have that will have expertise, or not? I take out expertise because you're not going to have like a majority expertise, but going to have the opportunity to do enterprise design.
I know what you're saying, and I'm trying to say, like, shoot for the stars and fall on like clouds. So if you can try to really stretch your legs and like, if you redesign, I don't know, Facebook, do you know how many like constraints that they're under, like how many timelines, how many like all this crazy stuff that finally led them to that design? Probably took them like half a year for the most simplest thing.
Actually, I will agree with you. Not okay. The seemingly boring things are actually one of the things that could be really beneficial to dive deep into. And the reason why I say that is because I have a friend who is an investor, or sorry, he works at a hedge fund, and I asked him, what are the most exciting investments that you have? And he's like, or the best investments, not the most exciting, the best investments. And he was like, my best investment is the most boring one. And I was like, okay.
Ooh,
He's like, I don't want
interesting.
he's like, I'm not gonna talk about it because it's really that boring. And I'm like, no, I'm fascinated now. What do you think is boring? And he said, my best investment is a newspaper company. And I was like, how did you get, like, how is that your best investment? And he's like, because nobody wants it. Nobody wants it, but it's still something that people need. And so that business is
Yes.
still going to be around regardless.
Ah, that's smart.
Yes.
And so,
Right
so
now, like literally my entrepreneurial brain on that point, like it's thinking, what does everyone need, but not someone's filling the gap properly? But what does everyone need? And it is as boring as you said, like a newspaper, for example. So that's my brain, is where what needs to be redesigned, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. So let's think of a couple of things for our viewers on like what are the boring things that they could redesign? Because you're right.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of people that said like, why don't you redesign Instagram? Or honestly, I never did any of those redesign. I personally just thought that it was just not a good use of my time. And like the things that I've currently done now are like a bit eclectic. Like one of the things that I've done is worked with a like a neuroscience lab, specifically in like doing their UX for a game. I'm not a game designer. That is not something that I do, but you apply the same principles. So what is something that you can think of that you can tell our listeners like that would be useful for them to redesign?
I also want to add to that is that I want someone, and this is another way to stand out. I want someone to add in so many constraints, like that is completely damaging to all of their potential, because we work in such a constrained system that it is ridiculous how many constraints that I deal with on a daily basis, and that's where the true magic happens.
That is very true. It is hard, I will say, to think of your own constraints, especially if you're not working with developers. Like right now, I am working with a developer, and they're just like, yeah, I mean, I could do it, but it's going to take me like a month to do it. And I'm like, okay, well, let's nix that. Let's think of something else. What are we trying to accomplish, and how do we do that within budget, within like this time constraint, and then like children can understand.
So and that's cool because you're converging onto something, but you were diverging onto like 12 different ideas that had no constraints, and then now you're trying to converge into something that took all of those constraints into factor after talking to people, and finally you're like, okay, this is the final product with like 400 constraints.
So how would you tell your mentee to think of their own constraints? So regardless, I think, because I think it's pretty easy to find like those design generators, like design I remember there was one, I was like, design an insult generator for dog walkers, something completely absurd. Yes, that was one of them. I am not joking. How would you tell a mentee like this, make constraints for yourselves? Where would they even start?
Yeah, so what I'm gonna pull this out of my buttocks right now, because I think this could be one cool way to do it, is that tell your idea to a friend and then just let them poke holes at it and just let them ask questions about the viability of it, and try to choose someone who's more business minded, or even your parents, because they'll just rip it apart completely. And just ask your parents, like, just say like, hey, I'm creating this app, like, what do you think? And then just start like get them on this rabbit hole.
Unless you have a parent that says like, oh yeah, Gol, that looks good.
Well, this all depends on who your target audience is, because if you always run it by like your parents, although I do feel like the parent test is always a great metric.
Oh, my mom would just rip it apart.
Yeah. So if your parents actually think it's a good idea, or if you're testing a prototype and they're able to navigate, I think that's a good sign. But yeah, looping back, it's like who's your target audience, right? I feel like this has gone to a pretty wild tangent.
That is a tangent. Well, I think, okay, well then let's bring it back. I think what Jarell brings up is, instead of redesigning an existing product, because I think every junior designer will hear that. Like if one of your mentees ask, how do I develop my UX and UI skills? Chances are they'll hear that advice. Redesign something that is existing, make it your own, make it better. I don't think that's bad advice, but I think that to make someone higher in their confidence is, don't necessarily do that, but here's another angle that you can do. Just look at like boring software that everyone uses.
Yes.
And And how do you make that better? Or just honestly just talk to a developer. I think that's a really good advice. It's like, hey, how viable is this?
Right.
How viable is it to make, because you can think of the solutions that are the most like outlandish and probably very creative too. But does that make it viable? No, it doesn't. So it gives you points because you are thinking outside the box, but it's not realistic, because then it doesn't actually make you, lack of better words, like that doesn't happen in real life. You're not given a problem and you can think of the craziest ideas and expect that it's going to come to life. That just does not happen. And so if you want to improve on your designs, build that confidence and feel like you're not an imposter, just go talk to a developer. Actually, I think they'd be great at like portfolio reviews. It's like, hey, this would not happen. Like this is very hard to develop, because as a junior designer, you're not going to have any concept of how much, first of all, how much you cost. So how much you cost to even do the work to design it. You're not going to know how much developer cost on like a scale. You don't even have like a concept of the ideal budget for this one problem that you're going to solve for this overall picture of the software. There's very skewed things that like beginning designers would like, they just don't know. And it's not their fault either. They just don't have the idea because they don't have that experience. So how do you build the confidence of someone who's just transitioning or just beginning, to make it more realistic for them? And like, because you're not always going to follow the double diamond. Like that just does not happen either. You
So,
know?
I mean, yeah. I mean, it sounds to
It
me
looks
just...
like a zigzag. It looks like, I'm like, okay, well, we completely scrapped this idea. Let's go all the way to the very beginning again.
Yeah.
Well, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to experience, and you get the experience through practice, right? So, so you gain confidence
But solo practice though, right? Too. That's different though. Solo practice is different
and
from
team practice too. I think team would be, that's a whole other experience too, because then you're developing your team skills, your soft skills, communication skills, which is a big part of the real thing.
I think the two main problems that junior designers face whenever they are just developing like the very basic skills is, yes, they are put in a situation that they're following a very nice process, you know, beginning to end. Right. This is how generally the process is. That is not a bad thing. That is how I think anyone should teach any method from beginning to end. This is if nothing bad happens, which it will, this is how that's going to be accomplished. But the two things that beginner designers face is, one, if you're working by yourself, you're not going to always have that like outside perspective to help better create your design. And two, if you're working with a team, chances are you're working with a team that is at your same level. So then it's not that you don't get inspiration or like an education or learn something from those other designers, but it doesn't elevate your skills in what actually happens in the real world.
So I want to tack on to this because in order to find these developers and in order to do all this experience, right, you're gonna wanna find someone to volunteer. There's websites that allow for volunteering. Okay. Step 2, you can ask local businesses and like, hey, do you have a website that needs help? You can just Google search around your area. Step 3, you can go into like there's different startup communities that are out there, and you can just say, hey, I'm a designer and I'm looking for work. Does anyone have any work? Step 4, you can ask a product manager if they have work for you. if you can get, your cut. So there's just a lot of communities, I'd say, is probably the number one thing, is that's where you can reach out to people and just say, hey, I can help, and find connections there. And it's not as scary as LinkedIn can be.
Those are good tips. Really good tips.
Yeah, I just reached out to a bunch of nonprofits whenever I started my transition. That's why I didn't do a boot camp, because I was like, I'm gonna find something to do free work. Like, surely nonprofits are gonna accept free work.
So that's good. So you do want to ramp up. You kind of want to like start with your risk, like low risk projects, things like that, and eventually you want to make your way up, right? So yeah. By the way, shout out to Andre. He's in the house. And
hi, Andre.
Hi, Andre.
We got A. Joseph. So
hi, Angela.
And also want to shout out to Laura. Thank you again. This is your second time, so thanks for your support. So if you have any more, yeah, that's right.
Man,
so
you have henchmen like.
He's got followers.
You have people promoting your work too. Oh my goodness.
So funny.
Here, let me tell you a story about.
He's got his crew.
We were in a conversation, and Jarell slacks me. Actually, no, he messaged me on Discord to his community to join his Slack, and I'm like, "There's only 3 of us in this conversation. Did you really just send me a Discord message to join your Slack?"
Andre says, "Hey."
Hi, Andre.
Well, to be fair, you did mention that you wanted to, get involved and talk to other people in the community. So as soon as you said that, that's when I DM'd you.
Oh, so you don't have henchmen, you have lovers. Oh, so good.
Do you have...
Laura, yes, we know you have a very active life. You are a wonderful, wonderful
That's
person.
Funny. That's hilarious. I don't remember if I had specifically said that, but I did join your community, and I was like this close to putting an introduction saying that I'm here because Jarell sent me an invite.
Please do it.
And like,
I just want to do that.
And then just like not
all these
introduce
supporters.
myself.
Andre, this is his life.
This is our
Jarell.
life. This is our life.
Yes.
It honestly is. Well, this is what happens when you can't physically see people. So,
well, I think.
Yeah.
Let's bring it back. I think this is good. Can we take this conversation further? Or I feel like we've covered a lot of good points. Like, I think it's through practice. It's through. I think if you're beginning, you practice on your own, and then also like if you want to get into a boot camp and stuff, or join other design communities who are of the same level, that also boosts your confidence too, right? Like with practice, you refine your skill levels, but it will never prepare you for the real world, which I think that's where a lot of most boot camps they get made fun of, because it's like ivory tower, right? Like it's the ideal situation, but most boot camps don't work on real life projects. There's some that do. It's rare, and I think that's good, because then you really learn how to navigate through people and like communication issues.
So I want to add something that we didn't talk about, and I don't know if we have time to, but I want to kind of uncover a little bit about the person that is, let's say, me 4 years in, and I have that kind of constant back of my the head saying, hey, you haven't done this yet, you don't have experience, why did you get the job, all that kind of stuff. And then you have a manager telling me,
You've got people backlash like you at like that?
No, this is my voice. This is the inner voice.
Oh, I was about to say, I was like, wow, that's really mean.
No.
But I think that also goes to show that like our inner voice, if we said that to a physical person, like that is so mean.
You would never talk to someone else like you talk to yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry, I
So
cut you off. Continue.
okay, no worries. I'm just saying is that a manager had to kind of talk me down that ledge and was like, no, you were chosen for a reason. You did amazing. You're worthy. And he said it in such a way that really wants me to believe it. So I need to hear that, right? Take it a step further. I think having that mentor in a company is instrumental for your growth and to fight that kind of
Right.
imposter syndrome.
Right.
And then if you don't have someone in that, in your company, I know you had a design coach come on last time. So having someone like that can help so much at any stage that you can, just to be in the back corner and to being like, no, your inner critic is wrong, your inner voice is wrong, let's wheel it back, let's take you back to reality, just to push you back into a better balance zone.
All right, I'm gonna set you up for a plug. So where can people find mentors if they're looking?
ADPList.
Oh, okay. And are you all booked up, or are you looking for or do you have vacancies?
So my booking, I'm trying to take like as much of a break right now as I can, so it
Fair
is
enough.
full. It is pretty
Gotcha.
much full to the
Okay,
brim. I
Jarell is
think I've like
taken. He's off the market.
but we'll see in July, and a lot of these kind of are a mixture of long term and like one-offs, but I do have quite a few long term as well.
Okay, awesome. ADP list. All right, there's a free shout out for you guys.
Whitmire, you are mute. You are mute.
Can't hear you. You want to say something? Oh, technical difficulties. All right. So, all right. When did university degrees become the minority? Yeah, that is very interesting. It seems like, yeah, Andre doesn't have one. No? Okay. It's interesting, especially in this space, in this industry. Like, I mean, you're hearing like high school students coming out. They don't, and they're so good at their coding or designing, but it is really neat, especially now with COVID. Like universities they're all learning online, and so I did talk to some educators, and they did kind of predict that. There's a huge drop in university enrollments, and learning like in design communities like this are popping up, and it's just as effective. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, the
Credentials.
non-traditional methods.
Yeah.
Yeah, the non-traditional methods are still valid, right? You just kind of have to push a little bit farther, and you just need more context, and you're going to have to double down, honestly, compared to those who have degrees. Which, I mean, I have like an associate's degree. I don't even have like a bachelor, so I'm already like another cut below other people.
Yeah, it's interesting just to show like where education is going.
Yeah. I think also people have a skewed view of those who have degrees. Like whenever people hear that I have an engineering degree, they're like, wow, you must be really smart. And I'm like, what makes you think that? Like, I know so many people who got C's. Granted, C's definitely gets degrees.
Hey, shout out.
And like in engineering, and they just kind of like skim by and they still got their degree too. I'm not alluding that grades is a reflection of how people work at all whatsoever, but it does have this misconception and like very skewed association on whether someone is intelligent or not.
I had one, I will never name names, but I did have this one classmate that skirted by, had everyone help her, just absorbed up all the energy, was honestly not very bright. And she still graduated, and she probably passed most of her stuff. And it just was kind of sad.
C's get degrees.
But and she's still working, which is good for her. But I'm just like, I ponder on that, like, wow. Like you can still.
She also could have changed too. Maybe you should give her like the benefit of the doubt.
Your grammar on Instagram stories, not the finest, not gonna lie.
Okay, well,
I'm sorry.
I see. Whole judgment.
I know.
While I was trying to figure out my microphone situation, the one thing that I actually wanted
Mhm.
to say about the mentors is, you know, it takes a lot to find a good mentor.
Yes.
But
Yes.
but
It's like
for
speed
the time
dating.
being, right. But for the time being, I think to bring it back to this whole imposter thing, the way that I would help with that, or the advice that I would give to anyone, is those thoughts are not going to go away. And I don't think it's healthy for anyone to try to suppress them either, and to think that, it's either true or not. And so, yeah, it'd be great if you had a community and you had like a mentor to essentially be your hype man. But that still does not like those thoughts do not go away because you have those external factors. So at the very least, what you can do with your time is, one, don't suppress it, because I think that's also even worse.
Right.
But at the very least, just acknowledge that they're there, and then use that as a motivation to just keep doing the work that you currently do. And I think oftentimes whenever people become more experienced, or feel like more experience gains more confidence, but all of our advice to gain more experience, I think the one thing, or the couple of things that would really make you stand out, because essentially that's kind of what we're trying to do, right? Is we're trying to be recognized for a profession that we internally don't believe that either we're not worthy for, or we don't have the expertise, is try to do the work that no one wants to do.
Yes.
So I think that goes for anyone, not just people beginning in their design career. The imposter syndrome does not go away. Those thoughts do not go away, but don't let that deter you from just keep going.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So is that your takeaway, Whitmire? Try to wrap it up here. We're
that would be my
over an hour.
Because I don't think that you should like have to look for a mentor in order to gain confidence in yourself.
Yeah.
I'll wrap it up as well.
Yeah.
Is that I agree, and it can only get you so far. But once you get out of that call, what are you going to actually do? What are you actually going to be able to put those words into action? And you need to be your own hype man. You need to be your own cheerleader, because no one else is going to cheerlead for your career and for the decisions you make, and are not in the interview calls with you other than your own self, right? So that's the biggest thing that you need to curate, is how can you sit with these negative and positive feelings, and then kind of just sit with it, learn how to accept it, learn how to be okay with it, and then just kind of understand that they're just experiences. We all have them. You are not special. We are all in this crazy world together, having these shared experiences, and it's okay to feel this way. And then you can move on, and you can not let it take a hold of your life. You can actually control how that experience actually affects you.
That's really good. Andre saying, I believe in you. If you don't believe, believe.
Shout out to Naruto.
He believes in you.
That's
really good. He also says, if you can't find a mentor, find like-minded people and start working on something to get people attention. So don't give up. It's really good. Yeah, network. I would say,
or find people that are not like-minded people. Find people that really test
that's true.
Your ideology.
Yeah. So I think you would have to have a certain level of self-assurance and confidence to get at that point, because that's where, I think you do need a certain level of like belief in yourself to like take the criticism, because it can be really hard if going for like interview time and time again, and like these design challenges, and then some employers could just be really harsh and rough and saying like, no, it's not good enough for XYZ reasons. And so it can be pretty demoralizing. So I think, yeah, it's important to like approach it as a step-by-step process. So
The first rejection is the worst, but you get used to it, and then it just becomes easier, and then it becomes like clockwork. And once you finally get through that, then you actually understand how valuable you are, how worthy you are, and you can actually stand up to these companies and be like, no, you're not gonna. I'm not selling myself. You're selling yourself to me because we're trying to find a good match, and I can find someone else in a heartbeat.
Gotcha.
That is true. I've actually done that in an interview where they're like, why do you want to work for us? I was like, I don't know if I want to work for you. That's why we're in this interview.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't recommend everyone to do that. So
people also try to break
like...
you. Stick with it. That's really good. All right. Any other final words before we wrap up here? This has been great. I think you guys already shared great advice.
You are not your thoughts.
You are not your thoughts. Yep.
Okay.
And then be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yes. Yeah.
I think those are the two advice that we don't even take ourselves at times.
And I would say for me, be your own cheerleader if possible. And if you can't, and those thoughts are bring you down, and that's okay, like we all go through it, then acknowledge that and don't like shame yourself or feel guilty because of it, and acknowledge it, and then ask for help. Like ask for help doesn't mean you're like weakness. It's just like that's what a community is there for. So and like we all need each other to bring ourselves up to a certain level where it's sustainable, and then almost like maybe the ultimate goal is to get to a point where you are independent, so to speak, right? Or self-sufficient.
And so one little bit to that is that if you don't know how to do that, find someone who can give you kind of the tools or the mechanisms to develop that that way that you can cope with all of this. I think that's one way that would be just like to help that inner critic and to kind of will you back in. You may have to do things that someone else just literally tells you to do in order to exercise your brain to be like, hey, stop, I'm good. All right, we're good. And then that can help a lot. Yeah,
so check out Vancouver Design Checkin. I'm going to link the description, or put the link in the description. And ADPList, join Collab Collective. I mean, we're here just to be a community to help each other out, right? Empower each other. There's going to be some people that are more ahead of us or below us, and we're all here just to like help each other out. So with that, let's end it off with some
after party.
Nice. Yes, actually, we have a Discord channel, so I'll probably put the countdown and information on the screen. But yeah, if you have some time, join us at Discord, and we can hang out at the chat.